This episode is brought to you by Neo Books and Coffee. Neo Books and Coffee is an independent bookshop and coffee bar housing a wide collection of both English and Arabic books, and a coffee bar that serves and sells the finest quality coffee beans and exquisite teas. This is Wafala Bedat. You are listening to the Woman Power Podcast, a subsidiary platform to the Woman Power Summit, the largest event in MENA, with the aim of empowering women and helping them achieve their absolute highest potential. Each week on the Woman Power Podcast, you will hear honest, vulnerable, authentic, real conversations from inspiring women. These women will share their experiences and stories into what it takes to build a successful business and career. The podcast will share insight and inspiration and hopefully inspire action and lead change. Reema Juffali is a Saudi Arabian racing driver. She's the first Saudi woman racer and is now participating in one of the most competitive F4 Championships, the British Formula 4. In November of 2019, Reema became the first Saudi Arabian woman to compete in an international racing series in Saudi Arabia. Welcome, Reema. How has COVID been treating you during this very strange time in our life?
To be honest, for me, I think it was more of a productive and very welcome peace kind of, just a little bit quiet and having time to myself. Obviously, there was a lot of fear going around and it was scary to hear about all of these things changing and lockdown. But I guess I took advantage of the time and I ended up having a lot of me time and, reading a lot of things that I wanted to catch up on. Racing for me, at least it's happened so quickly and it's been very back to back. So I took really this time to work on myself and things that I've been wanting to learn, and I got cooking again. And so, a few things actually have come out of it that I would say it's a lot better and more positive. And I say that I'm more of an adult, but I can take care of myself now. I know that I can cook, I can do my hair myself. I've learned all of these little things that I had to depend on other people before, but it was positive.
What was the worst day you had during COVID? How did you turn that around?
So I was in the UK initially when all of this happened, and I live here on my own. And then I didn't know how long it was going to be. They were saying 6 months, 4 months. I didn't know if I was going to be racing. So there was a lot of uncertainty in the air. And obviously that was unsettling. And my family were all back in Saudi and Jeddah. They told me listen, we really want you to come back. What are you going to be doing there on your own? And I hadn't seen anyone for maybe 6 weeks or so. So at that point, I was okay, I'll figure out how we can get back to Saudi, because even that was difficult. I ended up having to quarantine eventually after a month or so. I got on a flight to get back home, and I had to quarantine in a hotel for 2 weeks technically. And I went thinking okay, great or good, your family's worried about you, just go, pull the band-aid. Generally how I take everything, I'm I'll just see how it goes when I get there. And on the last day probably of we're about to take the test, and this is the decision of you can leave or you can stay. You imagine being in a hotel room, mind you, it's a bed, there's a couch. I got very creative on staying, not getting lethargic, not, going, I called a lot of people. I did 5,000 steps in my hotel room every day to make sure that I didn't feel lethargic or down. But on the last day, thankfully we could order delivery. That was the excitement of the day, what am I going to eat? And it was Ramadan. Wait, I forgot to mention that. It was also Ramadan. There's a lot of things. And then on the last day, I was okay, this is difficult. My mental health is, if I stay for another week, I started freaking out that I might have to stay another week. And what am I going to do for this other week? This week has been good because I kept myself entertained, but will I still be able to do that for another week to just, keep busy? Because I'm not a person who can just sit down and watch shows for 8 hours. I'd have to do other things. Anyway, for that fear, I just basically scared myself. And then I was you know what? I'm turning this around. I'm going to order some good sushi. And I'm going to forget about this test and what the outcome of this test is, if I'm positive or negative. And just completely, essentially, blocked the fear and said, maybe I will stay an extra week, maybe I won't. It doesn't really matter. Right now, I'm going to have some sushi and then take it from there. It was pretty much I had to snap out of that moment I was in. And it helped just having chatting to people, and a lot of people were sympathetic, so you can get that off. It helps to a certain extent. But yeah, in the end I was just good to go back home, and I felt so grateful to be out of this tiny hotel room with family on open space, real air.
It sounds, you went to prison, by the way, I know it was a fancy prison, but it was prison.
I willingly imprisoned myself in a hotel room.
There is a moment when we snap, and then there is a moment where we have to have a chat with ourselves. Like, the pressure, it's all in our heads. So I'm just going to remove that pressure, and having that mind control is so essential. And I'm sure you've probably used that tactic in many of your races, and we'll get to that. But Reema, people know you as the racer. You are now, your white space is you are the Saudi racer who is breaking every ceiling in the region. But before Reema the racer, I'm sure there's a lot of facets to you that maybe not everybody sees or understands. But what were you like before you experienced racing?
I think generally I've always been a very competitive person with myself. I've always been into sports, adventure. When people know me, they knew that I was kind of a go-getter, that do you want to jump from that high bridge or whatever? I'm yeah, let's do it. So I was always pushing the limit and wanting to experience new things, and I think that really not set the stage, but kind of allowed me or made racing even a thought for me. Because before that, as people are surprised when I say this, but I never actually dreamt of being a racing driver, because it wasn't a dream it wasn't a possibility. It wasn't something that was achievable. And also I'm quite pragmatic person. I'm very organized, very goal oriented from quite a young age as well. So it was very much okay, this is a bit too far-fetched, don't think about it, it's, and I'm not saying it's not something that people shouldn't do, people should, but I was just that person that gave myself realistic goals, oh, this is achievable. And at the time, obviously growing up in Saudi, I was the sporty girl, the girl that, would always compete with guys, or try and I don't know, I was the tough girl, I think, amongst my friends. But also at the same time, at work or in the environment of university, I always found myself trying to change something that I didn't really like or enjoy, or I speak my voice or my opinion. I studied international affairs, and part of that was how to get your point across in a clear way, and not try step on other people's feet, or so about being diplomatic yet still getting your point across and still being heard. A lot of things along the way shaped who I was and made me who I am, and somehow or another led me to racing, but they all contributed to me.
Where are that tough part of you that's organized, pragmatic, focused, competitive? Does that come, or is it influenced by anybody?
I think part of it is my mom is very I share a lot of similarities in my character with my mom in terms of being organized, being goal oriented, having that not necessarily self-respect, but always leaving a good impression on people. I mean, both my parents, but I would say that my mom and my let's say my mom's sisters, my mom has quite a few sisters, there are 4, and they're all just very big characters. Everyone is different. They're 4 girls, but I can't say that they're similar. They really did influence me in the sense of wow, look, everyone has their own route to take. You can be a doctor, you can be a designer, you can be an artist. It was so varied. They all came from the same household, and to see them take their choose their paths and then own it was very cool and empowering to a certain extent. And the same thing with my mom. She encouraged us. I have an older sister and a younger brother. She encouraged us as the siblings to kind of pursue our passions and see where it takes us. Not necessarily, I don't think she knew that she was empowering us to me to be a racing driver. She was just you like to play sports, go play sports. Where else can we find these avenues for you? For my sister, it was okay, you like to cook, let's get you the right tools or the right space to cook. My younger brother likes music. So it was just, I think that the amazing thing that we got was that support from a very young age to pursue our passions, and in no limitation. But also, it wasn't as if, you know, I was like a professional athlete from a young age. I wasn't, but I was, you know, I had the time and the space to explore all of those sides. You know, I played tennis, I played football, I played basketball, I went climbing, I did as much as I could, and I think they were supportive about that. And in terms of like, where did the toughness come from? I mean, maybe it was a bit of everything, like being around, you know, family members who were strong. Also, I think it was partly was my interests were very unconventional. Growing up in Saudi, like just being very sport, liking sport. I've always loved cars, so that was something that was different. And a lot of my friends who were girls didn't like cars, so I was already kind of I was going against the grain, and these are things that I loved, that made me who I was, you know. And I had to kind of force them sometimes upon people, or, you know, whether upon other family members, friends. You know, I'm like, yeah, I like sports, yeah, I play football, what's wrong with that? You know, do you want to play? I'll beat you, or like whatever it was. Like I had to, the things that I cared about and I liked, you know, kept very close to me. And I was maybe like quite defensive when I was younger. I was very much like, you know, like because I was protecting my space or the things that I liked, because everyone had an opinion against it. So I think that's really gave me some strength, because it was where I found that like passion, but at the same time I had to fight for it.
What's so wonderful about your story about your mom investing in you being passionate about certain things, and she's like, okay, you're interested in this, we're going all in, like, what do you want to do? And like, she's giving you all these tools. Her investment in you gets you to invest in yourself. So I'm sure later on, when you made your own money or you had more choices, you didn't need your mom there to say, you know what, I want to go climbing, I'm going to invest in it myself, I'm going to like use my pocket money or find a way to, you know, fund myself. So she probably gave you a lifelong gift, which is, you know, instead of buying, for example, and I don't want to be general, but like handbags, you would invest in experiences, because you saw someone do that to you and now you're doing it for yourself. It's probably the best gift I think parents can do or give us. You said that you were very protective of your space when you were younger, because a lot of people were against how you were kind of designed or how you thought, or the fact that you were into sports and into cars. Who were those people? How did that impact you?
I would say like I wouldn't call it against, because I was like, maybe I said that like that people were against it. It was more of just, it's in this, like in the framework or society. Like it was something that I didn't share with people very much. Like I wouldn't talk about my car passion in a room full of women, you know. I wouldn't go, you know, talking about football, because it wouldn't be something that we would share in common or something we'd have. I would say like with family members generally, it was, if I was, you know, into cars, be like, Hadi, you know, like Reema likes cars, you know, like it wouldn't be like, oh, let's talk to Reema because she likes cars. It would be like, oh yeah, you know, Reema just likes cars, you know, like something like that. Whereas like obviously there's some other people who would be like, oh, come have a look, I have a new car, do you want to come and see it? Like, and I'll come out, find a camera and take pictures of the car, you know, just to kind of satisfy the itch that I had. But it was more of, I think, less about people or individuals. It was the society that I was living in, I felt like wouldn't have accepted or didn't allow me to be expressive. So I ended up just doing it in private and finding different outlets. But it's so nice to see nowadays that there's so many other outlets for people to go out and do different things, express themselves. It's no longer private versus public. You can see it coming into, you know, the front now, and it's not something you have to not share with other people or keep.
What was your first job, and what did you learn from your first job experience?
So I think the first one was I worked at a non-profit, and I was studying international affairs, and a lot of the reason why I got into it was like, okay, I like politics, I like giving back, I like just people, working with people, and I didn't know what to study initially, so I decided like this would be the all-encompassing, and that's kind of what led me to, I did a few courses in university, and one of it was about like social entrepreneurship, and part of my university at Northeastern, you get this co-op that you take out like 6 months of your studies, and you go and get an internship and you work. And that was, so that I worked at a nonprofit called Arab International Women's Forum here in the UK. And it was a great experience to see, people, giving back, trying to give women a voice, share their stories. And I was like doing admin things. Like I had nothing to do with being on the front line. I was like transcribing, very basic intern related things. But I found that when I was working for this nonprofit or interning for them, that the biggest thing that they needed, or most nonprofits, because I was exposed to other ones through the conferences that we had and the meetings that we had, was the biggest thing they needed was to make sure that they secured funding for the next year, to make sure for their next event. And then that obviously sparked my interest of, okay, if nonprofits, if they want to do good, they still need money. They still need fundraising. And I'm like, okay, if everything is run by, capital, then maybe a good thing for me to start looking into and learning is business, is that side of the aspect of things. And that's kind of how I got interested in finance, was through my interest in giving back and wanting to contribute to the greater good. I'm like, okay, it's not just about that. There's a big substantial part of it that you need in order to do both. And then I ended up learning for 4 or 5 years, learning about the politics side of things, the history, people, how people work, organizations, what makes them good, what makes them bad. And then I transitioned into finance because I wanted to get that whole picture, to see the world full circle, like the side of the politics side, the money side. And it was great. Like it really did connect. And I felt like, okay, this is why this happens, and what drives what, and economies. And it was a very, what I ended up doing was just following my feeling, or my gut feeling. I'm like, okay, I like this, but I need to learn about this. So then I kind of went and decided to veer off and go completely off what I was studying, which was, international affairs, politics. And then I went into working for a startup and, doing finance. And yeah, I think like just trying different things allowed me to find myself in that space.
So you said earlier on that you always liked cars. And I just want to understand where that came from, because I think as young girls, we get the Barbies and we get the dolls, and maybe the boys get the cars and the trucks. And I don't remember wanting to play with any of that stuff. I look at cars and I'm like, my husband's into cars and I'm just like, it's alien. Like the language is not processing. I really don't care. So what happened with you that got you interested in cars? Was it like something you did when you were younger, or, what inspired you to just even be passionate about cars?
I mean, honestly, since I can remember, it's always been something that I loved. Like, as a kid, my sister had Barbies and I probably had Barbies as well. I wouldn't care about the Barbie. I'd be like, put the Barbie on a bicycle, put the Barbie on something that moves, like that was the point of the Barbie. Like I didn't like, or anything like that was pink or that was, too much glitter. Like I was allergic to those things. Like I could not, be around them. The thing is, I didn't have any brothers. Like it was me and my older sister. I had probably like my cousins, but I also even ended up liking cars more than they did. They ended up liking video games and some other things, but it was just something that I was drawn to. I can't tell you exactly how, but it just, like, even driving, I mean, from a young age, sitting, I remember the back seat of the car, I would make sounds of the car, like of the engine going, the exhaust, like going through the gears, like till now, like they'll laugh at me, and my parents are like, we should have known, this was, you were making these sounds from when you were a kid, imitating cars. So I don't think it's something that, they didn't buy me a car and toy car and be like, here, you can play. No, like I went after it. I was looking for these cars.
Neo Books and Coffee is a proud sponsor of the Women Power podcast. You can browse their incredible, beautifully curated book selection, build your wish list, and request out of stock and unlisted titles with the Neo Books and Coffee app, which is available to download on the Apple and Google Play Store. Neo Books and Coffee is an independent bookshop and coffee bar, housing a wide selection of English and Arabic books, stationery, and gifts. Their coffee bar serves and sells quality teas and only the finest Arabica beans. Everything is done to perfection and they have great attention to detail. They also have a stunning drive-through station, which you can pick up your books along with your morning coffee on your way to work. To know more about Neo Books, check out their Instagram page and download their app. Can you tell me about the moment you decided you were going to be a racer?
To answer the question, I have to give you like some context of like how it started and stuff. Deciding to race was a thing that I was very calculative about it. I was like, okay, I was working in London at the time, and different opportunities brought me back to Saudi to start this potential new business. So I was in the midst of this new business, about to start it. You know, I was in a crossroads of, okay, I need to commit to this and dedicate the next 2-3 years of my life to this startup that I wanted to start, and like at the back of my mind, that was probably on my mind for years, was the idea of racing, of just trying it. Even I wasn't even thinking about it as that I want to become a professional racer. It was, I want to get my racing license. I want to learn how to race, and I want to get on track and compete in a race. Like, those were the basic. It was starting small. It was do the first steps initially. And so I ended up deciding that I wasn't going to go after this project, and told my partner that I'm like, listen, I think I really need to put this aside now. I feel like my heart's elsewhere, and I need to explore this for the next, I even just said 6 months. Let me just do this for 6 months, see where it goes, how I feel, and then we can take it from there. And thankfully, like they were like accepting enough to wait and to decide, because there was also like a few things in the meantime that we were still deciding that allowed me to kind of like take that step back. And so that's what I did. I got my racing license, which was step one and the top of my bucket list for probably like 4 or 5 years. And 4 or 5 years, and in those 5 years, I was, I finished university. I got, my first job, then got my second job. So I went through the motions of the things that I thought that were going to make me feel good, the things that I wanted to do that I was expected to do finishing university, you get a job, and all of those things I enjoyed, and I think they are still contribute to who I am. But I couldn't get rid of this itching thing in the back of my head, which was, when are you going to get in a race car? When are you going to get in a race car? And so I did that. I got my racing license. A few months later, I literally did a Google search. I was based in Saudi Arabia, in Jeddah. So I did a Google search, and I was like, amateur racing championships. And I couldn't find anything in the Middle East. And then I did more research. Looked at each track. And I found that in Yas Marina, in Abu Dhabi, they had a championship, which was all the same cars. So all a single make series. And it would be a good starting point to go from. Their manual cars, so I'd have to learn how to race in a manual car. So there's a lot of the obstacles. That was when I decided, when I found the championship, I'm like, okay, I found it. This is the championship I'm going to, sign up to. But how am I going to get prepared? What do I need to do to start? What does one do to train for, racing? Anyway, I ended up again, going on Google, my friend, and found a coach who would help me train me here in the UK, because the UK in general is known to be the home of motorsport. It's the best place to, a lot of racers and racing teams are based here. So I was like, I want to go and I want to learn from the best. And thankfully I was able to do that. So I came probably for 6 weeks. I was learning everything I can to do with racing, going on track days, because I was doing everything just to prepare for this first race of the season. And I wanted to make sure that I was safe, that I was capable, that I knew what to do. I'm putting myself in completely new territory. So I wanted to have everything on my side, that or the confidence in order to enter the race. And honestly, that's how it was. I ended up ticking one thing at a time. And then when the first race was about, we were there in Abu Dhabi, my family was there, and everyone's very excited. And I am all my efforts, I'm this is, it's been 5 years finally doing this. I'm finally participating in my first race. I'm so excited. And my coach tells me, listen, the most important thing is you finish the race. Doesn't matter if you come last. It doesn't matter. He's like, you don't want to crash. You don't want to hit another car. None of these, the most for yourself, you just need to finish the race, which is great advice, because that leaves me with not that much pressure in the end. Like, it's, you need to, obviously there is still a lot of pressure, but like, not expectation to, come first, come third, like none of that. It was very much like that, and had my first race, and it just was the feeling of finishing a race for the first time, the adrenaline that you have, the how on the limit you are. And I actually ended up being, I think I was third or fourth overall amongst the cars. So I was right in the middle of things, and just all of that new experience. You're elsewhere, your mind's elsewhere, you're also completely like laser focused at the same time. And I remember like coming out of the car at the end of the race, and like I was shaking, pure adrenaline, like my body was shaking, my eyes were like popping out of my head, like it was just pure like jubilance, joy, like everything in one, and I think after that I was just hooked. It was like, okay, I want to do more of this. How can I get better? I want to learn as much as I can. I want to get better and finish in higher positions. So just that motivation and the feeling that I had behind the wheel, in the car, in control, was that was the time I decided, I'm like, okay, I think I want to make this something more regular in my life. But again, I was still skeptical of it being something I do full time. It was still something that I thought, like, okay, I'll do this for as much as I can, because it's maybe like once or twice a month. In between, I'll try and do other things, or like keep up the work that I was supposed to do. And then with time, obviously picking up something new like this, something as on the limit, or like, let's say, as high intensity, you have to like work on so many other things other than just being on track and in the car, and ended up taking too much of my time. And I ended up like 3 months in saying, I don't think, I'm going to move forward with this project. I have to, if I want to do it, I have to do it right. And part of it was also because of the attention I got. I remember after my first race, like this lady, or I think it was a gentleman, who came up to me with a microphone, and he's like, Reema, how does it feel to be making history today? And I literally looked at him, and I was like, maybe it occurred to me before a little bit, but it didn't occur to me at that moment. I completely forgot about. And I was like, oh my God, like this is like, I'm really happy. And I remember just saying like things I was feeling at the time, but it dawned on me then. I'm like, wow, like this is history. This is the first time this is happening. I'm involved in this. So it was very removed, because I was literally only thinking about, I'm going to be participating in my first race. I didn't think of, the bigger picture. And then with that, the next couple of months, I was like, okay, I'm getting, people are congratulating me, and I'm getting that attention, but I can't do this just as a hobby. It can't be a side thing anymore. If I do it, I need to do it right. I need to get the right people on my team. I need to improve as a racer, because I'm considered to be coming like at it quite late in life. So I think it was when I decided to come and compete here in the UK, that's when I realized that I'd have to dedicate everything and make this a full-time thing, and I wouldn't be able to do other things at the same time, especially because everything was new to me. I was learning everything for the first time.
Did it take your parents some time to come around, or were they supportive from day one that you were going to do this sport that is, very dangerous and really fast?
So with my parents, like initially, like I said, it wasn't something they thought it was going to be a career. They didn't think it was, they just thought, oh, Reema is interested in cars, and it's led her to racing. I'm sure they didn't like it to a certain extent, like they were unsettled by it. They asked me about like the safety, measures of the cars, like, what they wanted to know, all of these things. But at the same time, I'm coming at it quite late. Like I've finished university. I was working. I was already a responsible, adult. So I was not coming to them with, I came to them with, all the details, everything they needed to know. And it was a matter of, I literally was like, I would really love and appreciate the support. And this is my dream to do this. and it will mean everything to me if, get behind me. And I guess at that point, the only thing they could do is trust me and trust that this was what I needed to do in order to, be satisfied and find my journey. And I'm so grateful and thankful that they did get behind me, because I'm sure that it was very unsettling, and I'm sure they were scared and uncertain. Like, I put them through a lot of things in the last 2 years that, myself I was already experiencing, but let alone like not just my parents, but my siblings, my friends. Yeah, it was definitely a journey for everyone.
You talk about being in the UK a lot, and obviously getting this coach, training in the UK, going to Abu Dhabi to compete, costs a lot of funds. Who's funding this experience for you? It's like an investment.
So in general, like racing, especially at this level, which is the introductory level, like most racers who start racing maybe start from the ages of 6, 8, like very, very young, and go-karts. And the people who support them, of course, are their parents, until they get up to probably, like, if their route is the same route I'm on, so Formula 4, Formula 3, up to, let's say, Formula 3, it's still very much backed by family, friends, because you're not at a point where the sponsors can see you. They don't know what your capabilities are. You're still an unknown to them. They don't know that. So I thankfully have had some family backing as well as some sponsorship. I think because of my story is a little bit unconventional, so I was able to, even though I'm still considered, like, let's say, like they would say, I'm only 2 years into racing. You're only a 2-year-old. Like, they tell me this, like some of like my mentors or coaches, they're like, you're only 2 years old. Like, you don't have any experience. These kids who you're racing against have 8 years more experience than you do. But yeah, to go back to your question about the early stages, I think now I'm looking towards trying to make it more sponsor focused and ideally, get most of my racing covered by sponsorship. But at the moment, it is very much I still have family support, which is great, but I can't, it can't be forever, and it's not going to be sustainable. So now that I have the capacity to think about, because initially my first year, I didn't have the time to go out and approach sponsors, and I just had to learn and do what I had to learn and make sure that, okay, I'm capable of, taking the next step to, going up a level as well. And now that I am in that position, I am, reaching out to sponsors, speaking to different people, and it is definitely a very expensive and costly sport. So you having the right sponsors, supporters behind you is very important.
How do you secure some funding? I do also speak to some athletes who also have side hustles or side businesses, or they coach as well. But ideally, they would love to be fully sponsored, so then they can put all their energy in themselves rather than a side business or coaching. So it is tough.
Definitely. And there's a lot of, I think, capable, whether it's athletes or even racing drivers who have the potential and probably are like finishing, the top 3, but still can't take the next step because they don't have the support. So, I mean, definitely the support fund, like having that, the sponsors, the right people who are like-minded and sometimes believe in you, even though you're not at your best just yet, or, I'm not yet, coming first, I'm working my way up. Like, that's another thing, there has to be trust between there and yeah, just having each other's, not the journey, but let's say the goal, the end goal in mind, like this is a part of the process.
I'm obsessed with like triathletes. So I follow Daniela Reef and Lucy Charles. So Lucy Charles is from the UK. She's like, an awesome triathlete. And what's also crazy about because they want to race around the world, go to these big Ironman races, they're fully sponsored by like their goggles and their scuba outfits, and everything is sponsored. The bike is sponsored, but also they're creating content. They have vlogs and they have social media and they have websites and they have they have to keep growing their community. So the more eyeballs are on them. So when they say, I'm sponsored by Mercedes or whoever, that also strengthens their ability to get more brands. So do you feel like content creation is something you're also thinking about? Are you actively thinking about how to put out content, or is that something you're not thinking of?
Yeah, definitely. I've done a few things in the past, like a few videos here and there to see how I can, because I think something important for me is just to be authentic, to make sure that my message is that I'm getting across is helping others, but also that it's coming from a place of experience, and it's just coming out to be authentic. And I did do a few videos, and then my last collaboration with like a Saudi coffee company in Saudi, I did a series of videos which I actually really ended up enjoying doing. It was very nice because you're creating content, especially if it's something that you want to do or that's something that speaks to you. You end up learning a lot from it as well, like asking people like the questions that are posed, or remembering experiences that you've had. In the end of the day, like I'm the intention of doing it is to share my story with others, to encourage others, to hopefully inspire others, but I end up also helping myself in that way. And I have that, let's say, like, you not necessarily reassess, but you reflect on the journey, on what you did, and saying it out and sharing it just kind of solidifies the experience, let's say. So yeah, without a doubt, I think creating content and hopefully speaking to people or influencing people will encourage others to pursue their passions, whether it's racing or something else. And seeing another, I think for me it's important that I'm from Saudi. I growing up in Saudi, or I didn't really have many women to look up to, and in public, I mean, space, and obviously social media at the time wasn't a very big thing, but there wasn't many familiar faces for me to look to. It was always foreigners. I don't want that to be the case for Saudis or young girls today in the Middle East. I want them to look up and say, oh, okay, she looks like us. Oh, that she did that. Like, that's important. It's very important. And I think the more I can contribute to that, the better it will be for the next generations. And whether they're athletes or people who are just doing something a little bit unconventional, that's what we need. And that's what I would have loved to have as well.
How was the press coverage about you after that Abu Dhabi race? And did you face any criticism?
Yeah, so like I said, I think initially I wasn't like with the race happening and being so big, and me not actually realizing it's much bigger than what just happened. It took me quite a while to digest all of that. But the coverage was very much, yes, it did blow up, everyone, it was really nice that how everyone reacted, especially people who knew me or knew of me, sending me message of congratulations, like, oh, you're, inspiring us, oh, you're encouraging us to pursue our passions or go after things that, we cared about, or we still care about. And it was just overwhelming support, I want to say. Like, there might have been a few comments of people, I'm not someone who like dwells on, oh, that person said this negative thing. For me, it's like, okay, these are all valid. This is a conversation. If you want to have it, you're welcome to share your opinion, to say what you want to. If you don't think what I did was good, then I'm not gonna say that you're wrong in what you said. But I also hope that everyone else will change your opinion. It's a funny, like, I don't look at it as, oh, it's a bad comment. No, I'm just like, okay, this person thinks this way. I disagree, and I'm still gonna do what I love, and that doesn't get in the way of that. But otherwise, very like overwhelming positive support, and I think I was shocked by that. If anything, I was anticipating there to be opinions on both sides, but I want to say at least 90% was very positive.
What's the worst criticism you got?
I think the one that's like most common is like, you shouldn't be driving a car, or you should be at home. Like, that's the one that's the most common that I get. Like, this is unacceptable in religion to be out, and like I think it tends to be the more conservative opinions of, this is not right. But I think that rhetoric is completely, it's especially in our generation now, they're very few and far between that believe in a woman's place is in the house as at home. Like, that's why it's funny, because you can't it's not something like, maybe back in the day you would that would be the case. But now it's just like it's nice to say that it's not even the case. Like women definitely have a space outside. But yeah, that would be a funny one. And the other funny ones that are a bit ridiculous are like what did someone once propose to me, and it's like, oh, can you marry me? And I'm like, like, okay, this is very interesting. I guess I've been, like there's inspiration and there's something else, but that was a funny one. So there's also some odd comments out there that definitely keep me entertained, but I generally don't reply to them. I leave them be.
How did you feel when the news broke out, and also when you drove in Saudi for the first time?
So I remember exactly when the news broke out. I was on my way back from the airport. I was landing here in the UK, and I got like a notification saying, oh, women to drive in Saudi. And this was something that my whole life, I knew it was coming. I knew that at someday the women will be able to drive in Saudi. There was going to be something in my lifetime. I just didn't know when. I didn't know when was. So growing up, like, even though I couldn't drive in Saudi, I'll, drive in a farm. I'll drive in a whatever space that I could find, an empty space. I wasn't doing anything illegal because I was driving on the road, but I was still like trying to satisfy my interest in cars. So when that came up, and at this point I already had my driver's license. I was graduated from college in the US, so I had my US driver's license, and we heard this, and I was with my sister in the car, and I was like, and I looked at my phone, I was like speechless. I was like, oh my God, like, she's like, what's going on? She can tell, like, that I'm reacting to something. I'm like, you're not going to believe this. I'm like, women are going to be able to drive next year in Saudi. And she like screamed, and we were both like, oh my God, like in the car, like probably shaking the car from excitement. And it was just, yeah, very, very proud, and like, I'm like, I was just very happy. It was like a very warm feeling, and then when the day came for women were about to drive again, it was in the summer in June, and I was gonna be back, I think, a few weeks after. And I remember getting in the car for the first time, and like, obviously, like, now it's legal. I'm behind the driving this car, and I'm not gonna get stopped because I'm a woman driving. And it was funny because I went out of the house and took the normal route that you would take as a passenger, but I just knew exactly where I knew because I was also like I was very observant in the car. I knew all the roads, I knew the directions, I know how to get to places. So I ended up just driving, and then maybe 2 minutes in, I was like, oh my God, like, I am driving. There's no one else with me in the car, it was like a subconscious moment, because I was in a rush to get somewhere. I felt very excited. I had like a moment. I ended up like having to stop the car, and I'm just like, listen, you need to take this in. Like, this is not your ordinary drive. You're driving at home for the first time. And I was actually overcome with a lot of emotion. I ended up like calling a friend. I'm like, hey, let me pick you up, It was great. It was really good.
How does it feel to be the minority everywhere?
The one about me being, the only woman amongst men, I think, just given the sport that I'm in, and it's one of the only sports where, men and women can share the same field, they're competing against each other. There is something about that, like, competitively, that, like, when I do beat another, I'm not even thinking about a guy or girl. Now, especially as a racing driver, you put your helmet on, no one knows who you are. They don't know whether you're a male or female. And in racing, when they call you, or when they mention you, they mention your last name. They don't mention your first name. So again, you don't know if it's a guy or a girl. Obviously, we do as racers. We know if this person I'm against is it. So in general, what it is, it's you don't look at it. I don't look at it as I'm going to beat this guy. I'm like, okay, we're maybe at the same ability now. We're competing on the same level. I want to beat him because we're on the same level at this point. So it doesn't become a gender thing. It becomes realistic. Like, he's my rival at the moment. I want to beat my rival. But on the side of being a woman in a very like male dominant sport, it is like, I think one of the things that I always get asked, and I always it's this question is, how do you feel to be a woman amongst a lot of men. I think part of it is we definitely need to see more women in motorsport in general. There's very few roles that are at the moment that you find that women are in, because it's a very multifaceted sport. It's not just about driving. There are, engineers, there are coaches, there are mechanics, there are presenters, there are, media personnel. It's very, very big. And to see, the area where we call the racing area that we're in, or when where we travel, it's called like the paddock. And very rarely do you see women, and especially a woman in a race suit. When I'm walking in the paddock or in the area of like where we race with my racing suit, it's generally, the stares that I get are it's like a surprise, and then it's like curious. And the nice thing about it is like people here, will come up to you, they'll ask you like, oh, how did your race go? And they just want to connect with you, or like younger girls will want to take photos with you and be like, oh, like she's a racing driver. And so there's this element of, sometimes you feel like, people looking at you and those stares. But as soon as like I feel like, okay, I'm like, I just have to own it, I'm fine. Like the where it's coming from is it's actually just coming from because I'm, setting a precedent. I'm doing something a little bit different. But now, like, I'm pretty much just, used to it. I'm used to that in the space that I'm in, that it's that, because it's a little bit different, that I get that sense of curiosity, or people who find this a little bit odd still. And if anything, I like that I'm, changing these stereotypes, and I like to surprise people. I like to, not only am I setting a precedent in Saudi, but also in the motorsport community, to be racing as a female. It's still very few and far between you'll find female racing. So just all of that, I think what helps for me in the end of the day is that I'm doing what I love, and it makes me happy. It makes me, it encourages me, to get up all the time and, put in 100%. So everything else that comes in between, like, I guess the differences or the difficulties that might come from starting something new, all of those things are just, quieted down, because I have just that, belief that, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to put in everything, and it doesn't matter at the moment where it's going, or if I'm not, at the top 5, it's fine. I'm getting there, I'm learning, and that's what matters for me now.
We're very proud to announce our collaboration with a brand that we strongly resonate with and are huge fans of. The Woman Power podcast will be sponsored by Neo Books and Coffee for our upcoming season 4. Neo Books and Coffee is an independent bookshop and coffee bar housing a wide collection of both English and Arabic books, stationery, and gifts. Their coffee bar serves and sells quality teas from tea pigs and only the finest Arabica beans. They also have a coffee app available on both iOS and Android devices. The Woman Power podcast is delighted to be working with our new partners and look forward to producing more meaningful content and recognizing our goals together. Watch the space for more exciting details. So you represented Saudi Arabia for the first time in the F4 British Championship. Was that the best race level-wise that you did? And what was it different than other races you've done?
Yeah, so racing in the UK for the first time, and in the UK, like, the circuits are very, famous. There are like Formula One circuits. Some of them are former Formula One circuits. So that it's very like high level. The races are televised. There are very big crowds there supporting. So the atmosphere there is very different to what I experienced in the UAE, where, it's a weekend. There are a few supporters here and there, but it's not as big of a stage to be racing in. So coming in to that environment, which is obviously a lot more professional, a lot more like high level, with other racing drivers who are a lot more experienced than I am, and then coming in as as a Saudi. I don't think about it like coming in as a female, but coming in as a Saudi first and foremost is what sparked the interest for most people. I'm like, they're like, oh wow, like, you're from Saudi Arabia and you're racing here in the UK, like, how does it feel? And for me, if anything, like, I jumped into this sport very with very little experience. So I went from racing in the UAE, which was a Toyota, a manual car. It's what you would call like it's a GT car or a sports car that you would see on the road, but they modify that it becomes like a race spec car. But I ended up moving into single seaters, or what they would call like formula racing, and that is a very different ball game completely to sports cars. It's very different type of form of racing where there's more downforce, it's more physical. The racing is very different because it's the cars are a lot more exposed, so you get a lot more downforce in the car, and the car feels a lot more different. It's a lot more raw. So just all of those things were new things that I had to deal with and experience. And in the UK coming as well, you deal with like the different weather. It's raining, it's cold. The circuits there are quite a few, so you end up racing in many circuits. In the Middle East, we probably have like 3 at the moment, or 4. No, we have 5. So yeah, it's still growing, but this is kind of the heart of it, and where everything. So there's just a lot going on, and at the end of the day, like I was doing this, I'm like, okay, I want to do the best that I can. And again, I got some good advice saying that, listen, like the most important thing is you finish the race. The same advice I got like a couple of months earlier. And obviously this was in a different car. The variables were completely different. So I'm getting into this race, getting into the car before the race, and I'm like I'm nervous, but I'm also like just excited. I wanted to get it over with. I wanted to just do it because you're practicing for months before, all of this built up energy. Like I wanted to get there, start, but I also wanted to finish and say, okay, I've done it, because I just didn't know how it would feel. And as we were about to get to start the race, it starts to rain. And in raining and race, it's just a very different experience. It becomes a lot more like the track is a lot more slippery. There's a lot more things that can go wrong, especially in our level of, let's say, it's people who've just started car racing. There's a lot. Yeah, people that you can make mistakes. They're not as, let's say, you're not forgiven for the things that you do, because there's just rain and it's like slippery, let's say, and if you don't know how to deal with it well, it could cause you an issue. So I just start laughing in the car, and I'm like, oh my god, like this is what I need, my first single seater race, and it rains. So again, I'm like, okay, it doesn't matter, it's fine, we just get to the end of the race, this is the point of it all. And I remember like getting like I felt like nervous, but also like it was like nerves of excitement of like starting the race. And you see the red lights, because when you start a race, the red lights go on, the engines are like revving at like they're loud, and then you just go off, and then it's very much like everything actually becomes a lot slower at that point. It's not as much you think, because everything's happening so quickly. Everything ends up happening like you're expecting it, you have to react quickly, all of these things happen, but the process of it just slows down because you're so focused. And everything was going well. I had like even passed a few cars and things, and then at one point in like I think towards the middle of the race, my car spin, like I make a mistake and I spin, and I hit the car on my front wing, and the car is like quite delicate, that like it's made to, like if something hits it, it breaks. It's not meant to, like it's not like a lot of parts are like sticking out of the car. And and thankfully it happened in a place where I can go back to my team and they can fix the car and I can go back out. But obviously it means that I'll be last. It doesn't, like I'm not going to be, the race is so short that if I do go in, when I come back out, I'll probably be like 2 laps down or whatever. So I go in and I'm like already quite annoyed that I spun and I hit a car, but I'm like also still excited, and they changed my wing and we went back out, and I went back out and finished the race, and it was still an accomplishment for me. Like in the end of the day, like the score, like in the scoreboard or in the results, I did finish last, yes, but it was also my first race and in a single seater, my first race in the rain. It was, all of these things to think back at it now and say like that was probably like a year and a half ago, and to think where I am now, where I'm actually competing and I'm not making those mistakes. I'm fighting for positions. Like it takes a lot to have, I guess what I would say is like the trust and the faith in yourself to do something like that, to put yourself in like very unknown waters. I think that was maybe the scariest thing for me in this beginning of my journey, at least, was everything was unknown. Everything was for the first time. So I just had to like really trust and believe that, okay, I'm doing this. This is what I know. This is what I know I can do. This is what I learned. That's what matters. In the next stage, I'm like, okay, I don't know this. I need to figure this out. So it's just being kind of honest and trying to approach things with a little bit of, like, I'm with a bit more understanding, let's say. So I think my, in the single seaters that I've been in now for the last year and a half, it was probably my race in Dubai. I was like competing for, which would have been my best position. I was competing for fourth and I was in fifth, and most of the race I was behind this car trying to get past him and constantly like trying to find a way around, making different moves, trying to rattle him. And then I ended up finishing fifth, which was a very proud fifth for me, because I felt like I was not only like close to fourth and competing for fourth place. Was the guy that I was racing against was a race winner. He was someone who had won a race in the past. So the fact that I felt like I could put pressure on him and I could race against him made me feel like very proud. But my best memory was the race that I won in December of my first season of racing. I basically I won the race because I had good strategy. It was a endurance race, so it wasn't like a shorter race, which would be considered like 20 minutes, 30 minutes. It was a 45-minute race. And our strategy when we had to stop was, maximize the time you have in and out. And we have to make sure that we're on the speed limit, not under, because we're not making it, like losing any time. And I was at the time fourth place, which was already quite positive for me, but I was like a long way, like I couldn't see the guys ahead of me. They were that far away. And then when I came in to do my pit stop, I stopped the car, I came out, I was like, there was no one around me. So I was a bit confused, and I was like, okay, they must be really much further ahead now. Something must have gone wrong. And then like a few laps in, I see like 4 cars in my mirrors. And they're like the same 4 cars that were, the 3 cars, that were ahead of me. And I was like, why are they behind me now? But again, I'm like, I have 20 minutes left. Just focus on your racing. Keep going, keep going. And then like part of me at this point thinks, I'm like, maybe I'm ahead of them. Maybe I've managed to do my pit stop very quickly, better than their pit stop that I, like basically they call it an undercut, but it's basically that you have a better pit stop than the guys ahead of you, that maybe I gained 30 seconds overall, which puts me ahead of them when I came out. But I don't want to complicate things too much. But anyway, point being is I was ahead of them on the racetrack, or in front of them and looking behind, and I'm like, could they be behind? Could I be ahead of them? Could I be first? And I wasn't, my team wasn't communicating with me. They didn't tell me if I was first. They didn't want to rattle me, because I'd never been first overall. I've been first in my class, but not first overall. So like they didn't want to rattle me, like, she's doing well. She's, ahead of them, way ahead of them. Let's just give her the information she needs, but not tell her she's first. And I mean, that was a good thing to do, because I think if I knew I was first, I could have made a few mistakes and, just stressed myself out. But I ended up basically crossing the line. I got the checkered flag, which is like at the finish line. And the first person who gets waved the checkered flag is a winner. So at this point, I'm like, what? Like I remember, like, you could even see it in the video. I'm like, I won, like, I'm first. Did I win? And I was like in complete like disbelief that I was first, because I was like, again, so focused on, I need to finish the race, I need to get there, I need to make sure that I like hit all my markers and drive as best as I could. Anyway, so at this point, like, everyone waves at you and claps, and they're like congratulating you. I'm still in the car. And then I'm like, come out of the car, I'm like, how did I come first? Like what happened? And they're like, we had a really good pit stop. Like, they basically wasted like something like 40 seconds, and I made up the 40 seconds that they wasted in their pit stop. So I ended up winning the race, not knowing for sure that I won until I left, until I was actually out of the car, which was quite funny.
So what do people not know about racing other than you have to race? What does it take to race?
Yeah, so it is like a race weekend day looks very different to a normal day, but generally, like if we're racing on a Saturday, Sunday, on Thursday, we're on our way to the track. We're probably in the simulator that day or the day before, sometime during that week, preparing to be on track because our time on track is very limited. We don't get that much time. You probably get overall in a weekend like 3 hours, or including the races. So it isn't much time. So when you get there, you need to be really prepared and you need to be on it. So then you drive there Thursday. There's a lot of preparation beforehand, watching videos, looking at your prior things that you've done well, some things you haven't done, comparing yourself to the best driver. So a lot of prep work that's done. Then we probably get in the cars Friday, free practice, or which is like our practice sessions. And then Saturday, Sunday would be qualifying and race. So that in itself, like, it's not that much time that we're on track, but there's a lot of time that we're preparing in between the races, in between, and every time we go on track, there's a debrief of how we did. So we look at our video, we look at our what we call telemetry, which is our speed, our braking, and the shape of it, and comparing it to, let's say, the best driver that we have, and say, okay, you need to brake 8 meters later. Oh, you need to get on the power. It was very precise in that sense. That's a race weekend, but like on a regular day, training is a very big part of my day. Like you basically have to find whatever suits you and what you enjoy doing, because you're gonna spend a lot of time doing it. And I think for me, it's been like cycling and running. So a bit of like triathlon-y. Like I've done a relay in Bahrain last year. So, and I was like the cycling leg, when we just did it for fun with the team, which was quite fun. But I basically spend a lot of time when I'm not racing, either on the simulator, which is just like prep work and just fine-tuning skills, that making sure that I'm completely prepared when I get on track and I don't waste any time on track. That's one thing. And the other thing would be like, I would say, I don't know, maybe 6 hours a week or so of cycling, maybe even less, depending on how my week is. Running is another thing that I do. And endurance is a very big part of racing, because the fitter you are, the more time or capacity you have to focus on what you need to do, and your attention is completely on the track. You're not thinking, oh, I'm fatigued, or I'm like, you really need to have the best package in order to perform at the limit, and not like, either feeling tired, like even strength wise, like a lot of upper body strength is needed. Like I had to train my neck, I had to train my shoulders, my chest, a lot of areas of, you're driving in very close quarters as well, so it requires a lot of muscles that you don't usually use on a daily basis. So that's another thing. I have like twice a week of strength, and then let's say 3 times a week of, depends on, it's not necessarily cardio, but like sometimes it's endurance, sometimes it's sprint work. But it's very full on when during the season. It's actually not as much, because half the time we're recovering from the weekend, and then the things we do in between are like recovery workouts and maybe a strength workout. But when we have some time, I'm like, let's say in the off season, or I have 3 weeks, then I can actually get going and put in a few hours on my bike, go for a nice run. But like now in COVID, especially because our season has been a lot more compacted, we're usually racing from April to October. Now we're racing from August to November. So we have back-to-back weekends. We probably don't have more than 2 weeks between a race weekend, which is not very common. And it's a lot more work for the team and as well as the drivers. So now a lot of it is about recovery and about making sure that, obviously, like part of actually racing and what I've found is, the better I am mentally, not just physically, the better I am in the car. So I've worked on everything from, what I eat and how it makes me feel, making sure that I do stretches regularly so that I'm, lean and, I'm not stiff at any point. But also stretching helps me just start my day off well, gives me a good base to my day, and assess where I am that day. So a lot of things that you have to do a lot before you actually perform. And that's something that, I think a lot of athletes have in common, the prep that we requires to be at that, competing at a high limit and to get the most out of yourself.
Who is your favorite racer, woman and man?
I think in terms of, at the moment, my male racer, I'd say I'm a big fan of like Daniel Ricciardo because of just his positive attitude. He's like not your conventional racer, but I think Lewis Hamilton always gets a recognition and very deservingly, because he's shown time and time again that he can perform in all scenarios. And for women, I mean, I honestly, like, initially didn't know many women who were racing, and the two that I knew, one was Michelle Mouton, who was a rally driver in the 80s, who won many races and really, like, set the precedent for that time. And the other one was Susie Wolff, who again was a test driver for Formula One, raced in DTM, another like high level championship. So I think those were two racing drivers, female, who I knew of and gave me some inspiration.
I want to know, what is the big goal as well?
So I think the best at the moment would be making my way up the ladder of single seater. It's not like clear and cut because I'm coming at this a little bit later. So I think F1 is a bit of a far reach for me, but endurance racing, which is what they would call like one of the races is called Le Mans, the 24-hour race. That would be an amazing goal to be able to race in that and win it. So that definitely would be up there. But I'm not ruling out anything. I'm not ruling out Formula E. I'm not ruling out, it just depends, honestly, because I'm so early on in my journey. There's possibility. It just depends on how quick I get there and, how much ground I cover. But maybe a test drive in F1, maybe a Formula E race. Yeah, but I think what got me into racing, or what really sparked my interest, was endurance racing. So I think winning one of those races would be a dream come true for sure, and the goal.
Reema, this was amazing. My God, you are a great speaker. It was awesome, Reema. Like, honestly, just really focused. You have such an interesting combination of so many skills. And you're right when you say that, like, you're putting them all into practice. I'm very excited about your journey. Well done. And hopefully this will be a kick-ass episode and people will be inspired. That's it for this week. Thank you for listening to an episode of the Woman Power Podcast. And thank you for downloading and streaming our podcast every week. If you love what you've heard, tag us on Instagram and follow the Woman Power Podcast and Woman Power Summit account for more information on our next episode. Please leave a rating review wherever you get your podcast. It really helps other women discover the show. That's it from me. See you next week.